Hey, what up? My name is Sky, like the big blue sky, and today I'm going to show you 4 unique ways you could be using AI with cold outreach to book a ton more meetings, but with a fraction of the work. And the last one is my favorite because I haven't seen anyone else talk about this yet, and it's a great way that you can stand out in the crowded inboxes of 2023. All right, so the first use case is categorizing data. So have you ever tried to pull a list from like Apollo, ZoomInfo, or Sales Navigator? You spend a bunch of time finding the right filters, putting a bunch of keywords into your search to refine it. You pull the list only to find out that after all the work that you did, the list still is littered with tons of companies who aren't actually a good fit. For example, let's say you pulled a list of B2B SaaS companies and you start diving into prospect only to find out that the list still has a ton of B2C companies or agencies or just a bunch of other folks that don't actually fit the criteria that you set. Now, in the past, you either had to be okay with the lower level of accuracy in your list and you essentially just spam those prospects anyways, or you had to input a manual review step into your prospecting workflow to make sure that every company was actually a good fit for you, which is a really time-consuming piece that can slow down your prospecting and make it a lot more expensive. Instead, you can use a tool like Clay to feed information about a company into OpenAI and have it categorize that company for you. So what are some examples of how we're using this right now? 2 really easy examples to just get your creative juices flowing here. The first one is we'll scrape information from LinkedIn, or we'll pull information about the company from our database like Apollo or ZoomInfo, and we'll pull that into a Clay table, and then we'll feed it into OpenAI and have it categorize a company as B2B or B2C. Another example is we work with a client who's in the software development space, and he prefers to work with software companies with non-technical founders because they would have more of a need for his service. And so what we do is we pull all of the founders into a list, and then we scrape all of their past job experience into the same table, and we feed that job experience into OpenAI and have it categorize prospects into buckets of technical founders or non-technical founders based on their past job experience. Use case number 2 is summarizing information that you can scrape from a prospect's website. And so this will help with automating all of the research that you might otherwise have to do to personalize an email to a prospect. So to preface this, there is an endless number of ways that you can apply this concept, but to keep this video short and consumable for you, I'm gonna give you 2 specific examples. And for context, we realized a couple years ago that 99% of salespeople, they just stop at LinkedIn and they only use information from a prospect's LinkedIn to personalize an email to their prospect. And while this is totally fine, what I'm sure you can imagine is that those prospects, they receive a ton of emails with information all from the same source. So most of those emails look and sound the same because sales reps are essentially personalizing with the same limited pieces of information. So one way that you can stand out with your outreach is just finding a different source of information about your prospect. And of course, one of the best sources to find information is actually on a prospect's website. And typically there's more information either about the prospect story, their company, and the use cases, just because there's more space for text and the ability to expand on someone's website as opposed to their LinkedIn profile. And so we used to teach salespeople to start with the website to find more unique data points to personalize to your prospect, but now we can automate the entire process from actually doing the research to writing the personalized email based on that information. So okay, let's walk through some examples. And again, I'm gonna start with Clay here. If you can't tell, this is one of my favorite new tools. So once you get a list, upload it into Clay, you can extract the sitemap for every single website or company that's on your list. And basically the sitemap is a list of every web page that exists for a website, like in the screenshot here. And the nice thing about using Clay, as you can see, is that it categorizes all of the web pages really nicely for us, so it's super easy to use. Then from there, contacts can be bucketed into different campaigns depending on the web pages that they have on their site. For example, in one group, we'll bucket contacts that have testimonial type of web pages on their site. So these are essentially web pages where it's their clients talking about the experience that they've had working with whoever your prospect is. And so we're able to take all of those web pages, scrape all of the text from those web pages, feed it into OpenAI, and have OpenAI craft a personalized line with one very specific testimonial from the site. And this strategy, it works so well that even for the negative responses, so when someone says that they're not interested and they respond back to an email from us, most of the time people will respond back like this and they'll thank us for at least doing research, when in reality, sure, there was research done, but it was all completely automated, so it didn't take any effort from our team. Then another group that we'll bucket contacts into are companies who have leadership and about type of pages on their website. And these are great because they typically have a lot more expanded stories and information about different members of the founding team than it would otherwise have on their LinkedIn profile, which again, we can scrape that information, add it to the clay table, feed it into OpenAI, and have it write a personalized line for us for an email. Okay, now let's move on to use case number 3. And this one's interesting because as of recording this video in April 2023, most people are still saying that AI is incapable of writing an entire cold email by itself that's high quality. So essentially they're saying that all the AI can handle is writing individual lines or different small components of the email. But the only reason why they're saying this is because they haven't figured out how to fine-tune their own AI prospecting model yet. And for context, some of the main problems that people are running into when they try to use AI to craft an entire email right now is stuff like having really formal filler kind of language in the email. So it'll add stuff like, I hope this email finds you well. Or the base models will unknowingly use the incorrect pronouns in the email. So instead of talking directly to the reader by saying you and your business, it'll talk about the reader in third person to the reader. So it'll say they or their business, when in reality, it should be talking directly to the reader, right? Another big problem are really choppy transitions from line to line to line. So essentially it's missing the ability to add small changes or language that makes the email more readable from line to line. And then finally, one of the hardest problems to solve is a lack of nuanced personalization. So, okay, what do I mean by this? Let me pull up an example of an email template that we use. And so this is just the first 2 lines of an email template that we use. And as you can see, there's 2 points here where personalization is added. So we've got, hey, first name, I saw that you blank. And so within that blank space, there's personalization added for what the business does. And then after the personalization, it moves on to a transition question where it says, which made me curious what systems you have in place to get more blank. And in that blank, there will be personalization based on whoever their ideal customer profile is. So it's like, get more demos with hospitals, book more sales calls with agencies. And so before, you would have to really segment lists into small batches, or it'd be really complicated to add all of these different steps to scrape the information from online, summarize the information, then just write one individual line of the email. And it ends up adding a lot of complexity to the system, which becomes challenging to scale. It adds more cost because you've got to use all of this other data to scrape more information and do all these other different steps to summarize it with AI and then to write more lines. But with our fine-tuned model, we're able to do all of it in just one simple step. And we've even trained it so well that it understands when to use some of the small nuanced language. Like, we don't have to give it any context, and it will understand when to say book more demos with hospitals versus something completely different for a different prospect who might be in the list. This is important because obviously simple scales and fancy fails. And so within this process, by having our own fine-tuned model, we can have a much more simple prospecting workflow here. And we can just complete the entire email with all of the nuance that we need in just one simple step. Now, what I will say is if you're just getting started trying to figure out how to implement AI into your prospecting workflow, it's going to be a lot easier to just get started having it write small individual pieces of your emails, but it's a little bit more technical. And if you're up for it, I'd recommend checking out OpenAI's documentation on fine-tuning, and it gives you everything that you need. All right, now let's move on to use case number 4. And this is my favorite because it uses a principle that I call storyline injection. And this is where, as you guessed it, we are injecting a story into the cold email to do our pitch. And this is such a powerful way to stand out right now because 99% of people are using the exact same tactics, templates, and frameworks as everybody else. And on top of that, this methodology, it flies in the face of a lot of conventional cold email wisdom. But if you think about it, if you want to get out of the ordinary results, by definition, you have to do things that are out of the ordinary. So you have to break the mold and break the rules. So, okay, here's how it works. Step 1, you want to go to ChatGPT and ask it to tell you a dramatic story. Now, caveat, in order for this to work, the story, obviously it has to be related to your product or your service. For example, I have a client who sells into the telecommunications industry, and they sell the conversational voice that's in an IVR system. So like when you call into a company, you get a phone tree and it routes you to the right place, or it gathers more information. And the problem is that a lot of companies have these inefficient or ineffective IVR systems that are bad at communicating with customers, and they just piss people off. And so their solution, it solves that problem. And so for step number one, I went into ChatGPT and I told it to tell me a dramatic story about someone having a terrible experience with an IVR. So okay, step number two, you might not get the perfect story from your initial prompt. So just continue refining the story, telling ChatGPT to make small changes until you get the story that you want and you feel like you can work with. So in this example, ChatGPT told me this dramatic story about a man waiting for some important news from his doctor, and he hadn't heard back. So he tried calling into the doctor's office, but he was never able to get through because the IVR system was just so incompetent and it wouldn't direct him to where he needed to go. So finally, now in step number three, we turn that story into a cold email. And let me pull up an example of how this turned out. So okay, as you can see, subject line, still no news. First name, I still haven't heard back from the doctor. I tried calling the office, but I couldn't get through their robo phone tree. I called back 4 different times to go through all the extensions, but none of them fit why I was calling. Not to mention, the robot kept misunderstanding me. It wasted so much time and I still don't have an answer. And that's why we do what we do. When your clients aren't happy with the voice of the call center or IVR, we help you ditch your blood-boiling phone systems and replace it with the conversational voice your clients want for their setup. Interested in learning how? So okay, at the beginning, we have a really strong hook that piques curiosity. No one else, especially a salesperson, is sending an email like this. It almost feels too private and personal that it's gonna pique a lot of curiosity, and it's going to drive someone to open and read the entire email to find out what in the world is happening. From there, we use a story to shine a light on the problem. Then we tie that story back in with the value proposition of the company and close out the email with an interest-based call to action. So okay, that's all I got for you. If you found this video valuable, please hit the like and subscribe button below so you can get notified when we release new content. But other than that, happy prospecting, and I will see you on the next video.